Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed.
What is up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. It happens every single time I have a guest on this show who is considered to be on the fringe of the far left or the far right. And every single time it happens, I roll my eyes. People asking me not to platform people asking me not to talk to people. And I just disagree, fundamentally disagree with everything that kind of demand stands for. And today we have one of those guests. She is a member of European Parliament, and she is also a fierce critic of our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. And I am going to give you an example of that right now.
More appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a prime minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy, should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
I assure you, Ms. Anderson, that Prime Minister Trudeau will address this House and exchange with us on the most important topics that we are facing today.
Please welcome to the show a member for the Alternative to Germany Party. Her name is Christine Anderson. Christine, how are you?
Fine. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Thank you for coming. That speech made headlines around the world. I believe that was in March that you made that speech. First of all, can I just ask if you get along well with that lady that spoke at the end?
Metsola, she is the president of the EU Parliament.
Okay.
Well, our paths do not cross that often, so we don't have that much opportunity. If we see each other in the hallway, obviously we greet each other. Okay. But yeah, I'm probably one of the persons she does not like that much.
Well, we can't please everyone. There was something that stood out from that speech that might be not what you're normally used to being asked as a first question when it has to do with Justin Trudeau, although we'll get to that. And it is normally you would associate someone that talks about the same types of issues that are important as you do, and free speech is usually at the top of that list. But you did say that you wanted to sort of ban Justin Trudeau from speaking in front of the EU Parliament. Was that sort of a misstep by you, or was it something that you meant literally?
No, I did not try to prevent him from speaking. I just would have liked him to address under the appropriate article, which was Article 144. And that is an article we usually debate violations of human rights. So they should have labeled it his address under that article. That was my point, actually, that I was trying to make. And I ended that speech, saying he should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. And that I did mean because someone that does admire the Chinese basic dictatorship, and from what we're seeing, what's going on in China right now, I was right on. And anyone supporting a totalitarian, misanthropic regime like that, he should not have the right to address a House that is supposedly be full of Democrats. That was my point. That's okay. What I was trying to make.
I think we should try to correct the record if I can, because I remember when he made that, it was sort of Justin Trudeau, by the way, when you're Canadian, you tend to either love him or hate him. I actually don't love him or hate him. I am not a liberal supporter. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. Nothing in this interview is going to come from any sort of admiration from Justin Trudeau. I do not think he's an effective leader. However, the China comment was an offhanded comment that he made just before he was elected for the first time 7 years ago. And it was clearly sarcastic if you were in the room or if you saw the footage. But it has been milked by the Ezra Levants and rebel medias of our country for so long. It's just become this talking point. I think because, and this is my question to you, you might not agree with how I characterize his comments on China, but I'm telling you, as someone who was there, it was sarcasm. And I don't like to defend Justin Trudeau. But don't you think that our politics are being debased in such a way to the point where the going strategy among people on both sides, if you want to look at it like left and right, where they say the things that they know will inflame people, and they milk that because they know that they can, attach new supporters to every time they put a talking point out like that. Do you think that that's a problem? And don't you think it's kind of a bipartisan problem at this point?
I absolutely agree with you. That is a problem. The point is this. When you look at, the way mRNA-free people have been treated throughout this pandemic, they have taken so much backlash. They've been ostracized. They've been discriminated against, stigmatized. They've been labeled terrorists. That really was so uncalled for, and it had no scientific or legal basis whatsoever. And that is the very grounds that you would build a totalitarian regime on. And I just saw this. So I'm terribly sorry if he made that comment as a sarcastic remark. That may very well be, but I don't cling to remarks like that. I just look at how people act. And up until this day, there has not been a single leader in the Western democracies calling out China for their horrific regime and all the really dehumanizing measures they impose on the Chinese people. So that's exactly the point where I get really angry, because we have a democracy, or should have a democracy, and I will always defend freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. And I see it violated on so many levels throughout the Western democracies in particular. I mean, dictatorships, I do not expect them to adhere to democratic principles. I do tell people the truth, but I do expect that from democratically elected governments, and yet they do not. Something is going on, and people need to realize, yeah, there is something going on. I mean, they lie to us all the time. And I don't know how many lies do we actually have to uncover until they will own up. Yes, yeah, we may have stretched the truth here and there, but they will not do it. Their defense is stigmatizing, defaming people, labeling them terrorists, freezing their bank accounts. All of that is going on. And anyone not noticing it has a serious problem and should recheck what he considers a democracy to be.
I swear I'm not asking this to try to piss you off, but while you're talking, it popped into my head. So I'm curious what your thoughts on Russia are, and whether or not they're a dictatorship.
Okay, I will tell you this. Our chancellor, former chancellor, he called him to be the purest Democrat on earth. No, Putin is no Democrat, for one. And actually, he was a social democratic chancellor. No, he is no Democrat whatsoever. I mean, my party, we take national sovereignty very seriously. So if you think you can invade another country, violate a country's border with military means, that is an absolute no-go. You do not do this and then expect to be praised by the world. No, you do not. So that is my stand on that. However, and that's the other point, this war did not start in February of this year. It started at the very latest, November of 2014, with the events on Maidan, you may remember. And back then, it was not Russian rebels shooting down these people. It was actually the Ukrainian government. There may have been some interested parties in the backgrounds organizing all of this. But in the Western democracies, we not only did they not do anything to de-escalate that situation, no, they poured fire on the gasoline into the fire. So we should be really quiet when pointing fingers at others, because we're just right in there. We did not do anything to de-escalate. And the other point is this. Look at Europe right now, Germany in particular. I mean, if we really think we can, save world climate and stop the climate change, how ridiculous is that? And the means by which they are trying to do it, by cutting us off of our energy supply. I mean, this is so ridiculous.
What do you think that Europe and Germany can do about climate change?
Well, first of all, it's to me, it's just hubris to think that this is man-made. I mean, there is climate change, of course there is, but there's always been climate change going on ever since the world existed. So, and now just looking at the German numbers, I mean, it's I think our carbon dioxide emission is like 0.0003% of the world. I mean, seriously. So we cut down all of our energy supply. And by the way, Donald Trump was right when he admonished Germany during a UN summit that we were actually making ourselves dependent upon Russian gas. And I don't remember who was there. Well, it was members of the German government. They were just sitting there laughing at him because they thought it was so ridiculous. Well, guess what? Donald Trump was right. Yes, we totally depended upon the Russian gas. And on top of all of that, we shut down the nuclear power plants that actually are a reliable and clean power supply, because at the other end of the world, a nuclear power plant got destroyed by a catastrophe that could never happen here. So in Germany, we shut down the nuclear power plants who were up to the highest security standards. And now we're buying the nuclear power from France, Poland, wherever else. They do not adhere to our safety standards. So there is something, it does not make sense. And anyone not seeing this?
Lots to unpack there, but the climate change stuff, I don't want to get into the weeds in that because I'm not a climate scientist, but I mean, man-made climate change, there is a consensus among scientists that climate change is man-made, isn't there?
There you go. There is a consensus among scientists. I think it's like, what, 97%? Well, how do they come up with the 97%? Is there a list? Do they check off? Okay, he said yes, he said yes. Okay, so that's the one problem. Okay, well, provide the list. I want to check it. But that's not the real issue. The real issue is this. There have been times when the vast majority of scientists, I mean, the entire world, 99.999%, they were absolutely sure the Earth is flat and the Earth is not, or the Earth is the center of the universe. They were absolutely sure. And anyone saying something different, he was tortured, whatever. And it only took one man. And he said, no, the Earth is not flat. And we now know he was right. So please don't flash 97% of scientists agree on this on me.
I just said
change
consensus
tomorrow.
I just said consensus, but I didn't even know it was 97%. But
well, someone said it was 97%.
Okay, no, I take your point. Just a little caveat though, I don't actually know if it is the same over there as it is here, where a lot of the conservative parties are rooted in Judeo-Christian philosophy, and they're comprised of a lot of Christians. It was the church that denied science when they were saying the Earth was flat. I'm just throwing that out there.
Well, it doesn't matter. It was an elite. They did not want that truth to get out.
Right.
So you can back then it was an elite. Now we have a political elite. We have all kinds of elites, and if they feel threatened in their power, they will try to do whatever they can to suppress any kind of narrative that goes against their narrative. That's the point. So it's not. The problem wasn't that it was the church per se. It was an elite being threatened in their position, and they tried everything to not, basically get threatened.
Yeah. There's something happening in the world where conservative parties, and I know my former Prime Minister Stephen Harper chairs, I think it's called the International Democratic Union, and it's a collection of conservative thinkers that go to other countries and try to bolster the conservative party that is the most popular in that country. Some people see it as meddling, but whatever. But there seems to definitely be a trend around the world where the idea of governments are about to become tyrannical. There's a new world order afoot. They got that Klaus Schwab or whatever his name is. When he speaks, I can't remember his name. Schwab, that guy.
Yeah,
and the World Economic Forum, and all of these seem very familiar to me. And when I remembered back after 9/11 happened, we had the exact same things happening. And it was that the New World Order is coming. They were talking about the the name of that group, that the Council on Foreign Relations, and getting microchipped. And it all gets recycled every time there's a new catastrophe or a new problem. So it was 9/11. They did it again during the financial crisis, which resulted in things like Occupy Wall Street. And then they did it again for the pandemic. And it's just the same. I don't want to use the word conspiracy because I know that offends people, but the same ideas that are just repackaged and resold to people who are really willing to believe them. What do you think the reason is for that? And do you agree with the way that I described it?
Yeah, I kind of agree. The thing is this, these things, I mean, people have been warning about these things for a long time. And I guess the point you're trying to make is that, well, none of that actually happened until now, up until now anyway. So, but you know what, this is something that people really have to get and understand. For instance, when I'm German. We have there's a 12th period in our history, which I would describe as the most horrific time in our history. So when I try to point out totalitarianism comes about, and I try to show the mechanisms, and I compare these mechanisms to anything going on maybe nowadays, I'm immediately being slammed, being called a Holocaust denier, that I trivialized the Holocaust. But the point is this, Nazi Germany did not start out by rounding people up and transporting them off to camps. That was at the end. There were steps before that. Some of them seemed really rather inconsequential. I mean, okay, so Jews are not allowed to own pets anymore. What's the big deal? Okay, well, they're not allowed to sit on certain benches in parks. What's the big deal? This is how it starts, though. It's little steps. And people really need to understand, from what I'm seeing here, we are creating instruments or giving the governments instruments right now that could very well be used to totally control people. That is just a fact. And just to think that, well, we have a democratically elected government, they would never do this. Well, think again. because democracy and power, in a democracy, the people are supposed to have the power. The power the people have, of course, infringes on the power that the government would like to have. So there is a conflict of interest. And the government, everyone is always trying to increase their own power base. So the governments will always try to increase their power. And this, of course, goes, the people will have to give up some of their power. And the way they're doing it is by telling us it's for your health, it's for your own good. Trust us here. And now we need digital ID, but it's just for your own good. The government never does anything for the good of the people. It never happened in the entire history of mankind. There's never been an elite that was truly concerned with the welfare of the regular people. It never happened. Why should it happen now? This is the question people need to ask themselves. And I'm telling you, they will not. And they don't. I'm seeing the evidence everywhere.
Can you give me, other than the COVID restrictions like lockdowns and social distancing, which I would say if it's framed inside a pandemic, it still is a little bit problematic. I know people that are vaccinated and have problems with it. Like, it's not just about being vaccinated or not. But what other pieces of evidence, other than things related specifically to the pandemic, have you been seeing?
Well, for instance, for years, they've been working on pretty much abolishing cash. That's an agenda they've been trying to push for years. And now they're really stepping up their game. You hear about the CBDCs. This is government-controlled digital currency. So they just want to abandon cash. What does that mean? If there is no longer cash, then you have total control over people. You will know what they buy. Then link that with a digital ID. So what happens? You just go to a store. You have some guests over in the weekend. So let's say you buy five bottles of wine, and on your way back you stop at a gas station. Well, guess what? You will not get any gas because you just bought alcohol. These are just possibilities, and we're seeing this in China right now. This is pretty much where we could end up in 10 years. Who knows? So
Really?
You know what I'm saying?
That seems a little. Sometimes when I'm going to try to be as like my etiquette will be as sharp as I can possibly make it. But when you say stuff like that, it 5 years seems like alarmism to me. 10 years even seems like alarmism to me.
Okay, well, then make it 20 years. Does it make that any better?
But you're suggesting that Western democracies will morph into a communist country within the next 2 decades. And I don't know what that would look like. Like, are you saying that they'll still say they're a democracy, but they'll treat us like we're in a communist country? Like, and how does that work?
Well, it's not going to be a communist country. It's going to be a totalitarian regime. There is a difference.
Right.
Not to say that I like communism.
I'm pretty sure we got that.
But it's totalitarianism. That's what it is. And like I said, I see all of these steps, what they're talking about, what they're trying to implement. It continues by the fight against misinformation, hate speech. Seriously, this is censorship. They don't call it censorship, of course. They call it, we need to stop hate speech or whatever. It hasn't been that long that we had a totalitarian regime on German soil. And now I'm talking about GDR. So, the mechanisms are always the same. It's to me, it's quite clear. It really is. And the GDR government, they were also always talking about it's just for the good of the people, and we need to build this wall to come over here because the Western side was fascists. So it's always about protecting people. That is always the narrative. We need to protect you, so this is why we have to infringe on your rights. Well, they don't say that clearly.
how would a government protect its people from a pandemic without instituting policies that may appear to temporarily infringe on, say, your freedom of movement? Like, let's just say you believed that that COVID was a real pandemic and that you believed that the vaccines helped, because I know that, and I don't want to actually talk about either of those things, because
Right.
every time I talk about COVID on a podcast, I get it pulled because of probably the things that you're saying right now. But what? Yeah, I know it's ironic, but what kind? How
Yeah,
would you
well,
go?
misinformation. There you go.
Well, if you were chancellor, how would you protect Germans if there was a pandemic that you believed and was real? Like, what would you do to protect them?
Okay, first of all, I would not censor scientists that come maybe to another conclusion. And we're talking, not about some Joe Schmo who happened to go to medical school for a couple of years. We're talking about renowned scientists, Nobel Prize winners even. So they were just censored because they had a different evaluation of the situation. They were canceled. They, had lost their jobs, whatever. There was no debate. There was no scientific debate. It was all shut down. There may have been other possibilities to treat. It was not allowed. It was banned. So what we really missed here was there was no scientific open debate. From the very start, it seemed clear what they wanted to achieve, and everything was basically going towards that direction.
Who is they? Who is they?
See, if I could, pinpoint it or name it, I would, trust me, but I don't. I have no idea.
But how do you know what they do
For
if you
lack
don't
of a
know
better
who they
word,
are?
for lack of a better word, I will just say a globalist elite.
Yeah, but
Whoever that is. I don't know. If I knew, I would tell you. Trust me. But I don't.
Okay, let me offer an alternative theory just for a second.
Okay, go ahead.
The World Health Organization, after the last SARS, spends years developing a blueprint for precautions to take during the next pandemic, but they don't actually differentiate the plan based on what the pandemic is going to be, whether it's SARS or malaria or leprosy. And from what I'm told, one source inside the World Health Organization was able to confirm this. They had a blueprint, and they just took whatever the pandemic was and they stuffed it in that blueprint. And then Western democracies took, and you'll call it marching orders, I'll call it advice, from the World Health Organization, and it went down to Western democracies in Europe, North America, etc. Okay. Do you think that it's possible that we're just very leaderless, and the way that we handled this pandemic was really just people that didn't have much imagination relying on advice that they got from the World Health Organization, and it wasn't some nefarious plot to take over the world with a one government system that will microchip us and enslave us till the end of time? Okay.
The problem with that is the following. The advice that, how you would call it, that they were given, make any sense. For one, give you one example. Here in EU Parliament, for the longest time, we had mandatory masking. So we were running around, well, I wasn't, but the others were running around in this house wearing a mask. And in May of 2021, in Belgium, all the mandates were lifted in public spaces, meaning in this time around with masks. And at the end of the day, we would leave the building, walk across the street to Place Luxembourg, and there everyone was sitting in bars, restaurants, whatever, not wearing a mask, and pretty, crowded places. It just didn't make any sense. Now, when I travel by train to Brussels, in Germany, I don't, but the others do, they have to wear a mask. So, but as soon as we get to the last station before crossing the border, guess what? This smart virus just gets off the train And then all the people take off their masks and continue their journey. It's the exact same people sitting on the exact same train. But somehow, only in Germany, it seems to be dangerous. Once we get to Belgium, nothing will happen. It just does not make any sense at all. That's the point I'm trying to make. So, and then it was also the only solution they were talking about was vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. And to this day, it seems to be the only solution. But the other things that are also quite helpful in fighting respiratory infections is actually a healthy lifestyle. That means leaving the house, getting fresh air, doing sports. But we didn't do any of that. We did the exact opposite. And quite interesting, though, I was just on COVID committee today, and we are now looking at the socioeconomic impacts that, the measures really left us with. And we were talking to two doctors. The one was focusing on obesity, and the other one was pretty much dealing with the elderly people and focus on Alzheimer patients too. And I asked them a question because especially with school closures, playgrounds closed, people confined to their homes. In Germany, we weren't even allowed to take a stroll all by ourselves. Can you imagine? So it's completely absurd. So my question to them was, we have done the exact opposite of what would have been sensible to do, to get up your immune system. And I asked the first doctor, had she been in charge back then, would she have imposed those measures? And if the next pandemic, would she now impose those measures? The other doctor, he was talking about the elderly, dying probably of loneliness. I asked him the same question, and they both answered no, because there was no balance in, whatever the psychological dimension of having old people all by themselves, being completely isolated. And it was always about wanting to say, we need to save lives. Well, can we just stop a second here and define what life is? I mean, is it the sheer existence in isolation? I'm sorry, I do not consider that life. So rather than accompanying the elderly, we left them to die all by themselves. This is the most horrible, and this really gets to me because this is so horrible. My parents, I both accompanied them in their last days. And gosh, I don't know what I would have done had anyone tried to keep me from them. I really don't know.
Yeah, listen, I don't agree with that. Yeah, well, I don't agree with all of the precautions or
But yet
mandates.
they imposed it on us.
Well,
and
that's
no
the thing.
one said anything. And the ones that did say something, they were called Nazis, and I don't know.
Well, listen, I think one of the problems with this whole thing, since I would say December 2019, has been this idea that a fluid situation, like anyone that says that they were right about something in a situation that was fluid for 2 years, are probably just cherry picking where they may have been right, because hindsight is kind of beneficial to those who weren't being listened to at the time.
Don't
right?
slap me with that hindsight argument.
I would never slap. I would
because
never slap
I
you.
left
I would never slap you at all. Smack you maybe.
No, but that's what they say now. Well, it's 2020. Well, then
It's
how
not even
come?
2020 with this. That's what I'm saying. It's actually less 2020 with this situation. Hindsight is in this situation would be like this. It was probably a pandemic in 2019, in late 2019, because China took a long time before they even said that it was there. The mask thing was ruined by government messaging and leaked emails that showed that. I know my audience is going to hate this, but masks are considered to not be even close to being as effective.
Then ask yourself, apparently from the very beginning, something was up and they knew that these masks, they wouldn't do anything. That's the point. But yet they did it anyway.
I think what they said is that it wouldn't protect them as much as people thought, and the N95 was really the only mask that would protect you in a, like, you know, at a decent percentage. But my point though is that the problem that I have with like, we have a guy in Canada you may or may not have heard of named Maxime Bernier. Yes. Maxime Bernier is the leader of the People's Party of Canada. He's been on this show a bunch of times, but I asked him once. And I'm trying to figure out where you land on this type of question. I said, Max, if it was leprosy, would you accept a government decree that maybe we should stay inside for a while? And he said no. And I was like, then I don't know what to do with you.
Okay. The thing is this. If it was leprosy, you wouldn't have to mandate people. If
yeah,
it
you
was,
would. These days, you would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're okay. If
I
this
just gave
virus,
you an example of a leader in our country that would not accept a mandate for leprosy, right?
If this virus had the impact as far as mortality is concerned, then you would not have to. You would not have to mandate people. You would have known. You would have seen it in your everyday life. Yes. This is very dangerous, but people didn't see it. The only time they saw it was on television. Well, okay, that's the thing. I mean, if this pandemic was as dangerous as they made it out to be, that actually would have meant you left the house and you might have seen bodies left and right. And then you don't have to mandate anyone. The same with the vaccines, these so-called vaccines. I mean, if they were as safe or as effective, then you would not have to mandate people. So if the disease was as dangerous as they had told us, and if the vaccines were as effective as they have told us, then you would not have to talk about vax mandates. People would take it voluntarily. But that's the point. It was pushed on people. They were coerced. They were even they tried to suck them in with a French fries and a hamburger, a donut. In Germany was bratwurst. Really?
I think it was beer here.
Something is not right. And whenever the government is trying to do something for your own good, and they have to lure you in with something, I mean, sorry. All alarm bells must go off at that point. That's just common sense.
Do you think that there's any truth to the idea that the unvaccinated contributing to a quicker or different type of mutation of the virus?
No, I don't. Because the point is this. That is, that's a principle in epidemiology. You never vaccinate into a pandemic. That will create mutations. That's the point. And that's exactly what they did. And you can verify that. You never vaccinate into a pandemic. Then you have the mutation flight.
Where does that information come from? I've never heard that.
You can ask any epidemiologist. You never vaccinate into an ongoing pandemic.
Okay. I had Dr. Feigelding on the show, on the show last week. He didn't mention that. And he's an epidemiologist, and he was,
okay.
Listen, one of the reasons why I have a hard time talking about COVID and vaccines, I'm vaccinated. My kids are vaccinated. If someone's not vaccinated, I don't really care. I'm not going to judge them when they start talking politics with their vaccination, because I don't do that either. I get a little annoyed, but I'm trying to wrap my head around how we are going to avoid the fomentation of civil war in several Western democracies, which I think has a better chance of happening in the next 10 to 20 years than totalitarianism, and why we can't figure out a way to talk about these issues and to settle the science so that people who might be hesitant to take the vaccine would be more comfortable, or if your side proves that it's killed hundreds of thousands of people, the vaccine, then that data should be explored. But there's so much disinformation that floats around your side of the
Right.
argument, not you particular, I'm just saying, but people that support the People's Party of Canada here, that may support your party in Germany, that that were part of the Brexit movement or something like that. Like, they have their mind made up, and their mind is basically like this: the World Economic Forum is run by economic gangsters who want to enslave us and chip us with microchips and get rid of cash, and the one world order is coming, and we're all going to be fucked. And I it's a non-starter, that conversation.
Okay, so what you were asking is basically, how do we get out of this
Polarization.
Yeah.
Right?
No, how do we get out of this fix?
Right.
Because like you said, the two sides, they're pretty much so confrontational. So, well, what the government should have never done is shut down debate. There was no open debate. That is that for me is a really big issue. Whenever I have the feeling that I'm being fed a line and I'm not allowed to listen to someone else saying something different, I get very suspicious. Okay, and this happened here. And talking about misinformation, yeah, there's a lot of misinformation on both sides of the spectrum right now. We also have to acknowledge it was the governments too that spread misinformation. It started out by saying, if you get vaccinated, you will not get infected and you will not transmit this virus. That was a lie. But they told it over and over and over again. So when we're talking about misinformation, I want the governments to own up to their share of the misinformation. What I've been trying to do, I've just pretty much, yeah, well, you just said this, but it doesn't make any sense. I just wanted to have answers to my questions. It did not make, a lot of things did not make sense. And I wanted answers to my questions, but I was not even, I was most of the time not even allowed to ask my question. This was immediately dismissed as a conspiracy theory. But what is wrong about debate? This is the main issue. We need to get back to a point where we actually can have open debates. What we're doing now is really just going into a debate and trying to win. But a debate should always be, the goal of a debate should always be to get more knowledgeable. And that we did not do this anymore. And that, yes, on both parts that happened, but I will have to cut some slack for the ones that were really ostracized by pretty much everyone. That was really, for a lot of people, that was a horrific experience. They may have never experienced that before. I'm kind of used to it because I've always been devil's advocate, if you want. So, but there's a lot of people, for the very first time in their life, they've been labeled Nazis, they've been labeled conspiracy theorists, they've been wished to be dead because they didn't take the mRNA injection, all of these things. And there was a lot of stuff going on. And I really don't see any other way of a society to heal, if not both sides. But I will put a more emphasis on the governments own up to their responsibility and to their share in all of the injuries that have been taken place here.
Look, let's pivot away from this for a second, because I wanted to ask you if you could clarify what your immigration policy is, because I'm choosing the things that I see you get knocked around for. So I just wanted to just ask you straight up what your immigration policy would be so that you can answer in your own words and I don't have to read headlines.
Okay. Well, my party stands for qualified immigration, meaning that if we need workers in our country, then it's no use to pretty much functional analphabets, illiterates. That's not going to do us any good. And that's another point. I will have to come back to COVID again. I mean, during this entire pandemic, our borders were still wide open. No one had any concern for that. So anyone could just march into our country, no questions asked. But when I, as a German citizen, is I was not allowed to go into a barber shop, to a restaurant, or buy some shoes without putting up my QR code. This is ridiculous. But anyway, what we are having in Europe right now, actually massive problems, because we take in all of these refugees. I do not consider them refugees. The majority of them are not refugees. They are not fleeing from anything. They are trying to achieve a better life. And there is nothing wrong with that. I do not blame these people coming here. I would do the same thing in their position. But I'm putting the blame on my government because they were elected to represent the German people. They were not elected to represent the entire world, to come to our country and to be basically, fed by us, housed by us. They get all of that. That's not what the German government was elected to do. So the fault here is with the German government. I just want to make that very clear.
Right. It does sound a little bit like you're an isolationist.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, immigration is no problem, but do not let anyone come in. They don't have passports, nothing. They just come here. Most of the time, they don't even know who they are. And our crime rates, they are spiking. And they are not spiking, let's say theft. No, we're talking about homicide. We're talking about rape, gang rapes. All of that is spiking in Europe as we speak. And we're just supposed to sit here and say, yeah, well, we're diverse now. No, I'm sorry. I consider it that the most valuable achievement of any society to have implemented have peace in the public sphere, security and peace in the public sphere. That to me is the biggest achievement any civilized society can reach. And we had this. For the most part, we had this. And now we're basically sacrificing this on the altar of diversity and cultural openness. I don't know. I mean, who comes up with stuff like that? It's pretty much considered, well, yeah, you might get raped when you as a woman go out by yourself. But heck, we're an open country now. Seriously?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there too. But listen, I think that a sensible immigration policy is smart. I think it reflects. I'm going to paraphrase an old adage that you could probably judge the effectiveness and niceness, I guess, of a government based on how they treat the people that they imprison or immigrants. And it's when you're talking about allowing certain immigrants in, but not allowing other immigrants in, that does have a ring to it of almost like you want the elites. You want the elites of the immigrants. You want the elite immigrants, not the ones that need to be educated.
No. Okay. The German Grundgesetz, we have an article, Article 16, and it is in there for very good reasons. It grants political asylum to all those who are persecuted for political reasons in their country. That's the article. Political asylum. What we do, however, or have done the last, 10 years, is just allow anyone in who says asylum. But
did this come to a head? Did this culminate from the conflict in Syria?
Yeah, that's when it really peaked. That's when it really
So they were
peaked.
running from ISIS. Is that a good reason?
Okay, these were war refugees.
Mm-hmm.
They were fleeing from war. Fleeing from a war is not political persecution. You have the UN, and they set up camps, refugee camps around Syria. and they are funded by the countries, by all of the countries in the world, so they can run these camps. And interestingly enough, though, up until January 2015, the world community, if you want to call it that, they paid per refugee in any of those UN camps $31 per month, so they could be fed, sheltered, whatever. And after January 2015, they dropped this amount to $12.50. No one talked about this. I didn't see Merkel jumping up and down, being angry about this. She didn't show a pretty face or a friendly face at that stage. No. Why would the countries do that? And that actually led to all of these refugees now pouring into Europe. Yeah, because they did not have any food anymore. The camps, they didn't know how to feed these people anymore. But no one asked the question, well, why was the support dropped by 2/3? They just dropped it. Why? No one asked that question. They were all standing there. Well, we have to help these people, have to help these people. But that's not the point. These were war refugees. War refugees is a different issue. But we now, in Germany at least, considered them to be political refugees, which would fall under Article 16 of our Grundgesetz, which is not true.
But
and then there's another article.
If you're fleeing Islamic terrorism, that's not a good enough reason for you to be welcomed into a friendly country?
Once again, these were war refugees, and for war refugees, there is different mechanisms. But
I understand, but it's kind of a semantic though at that point.
The point is this. The point is all of these Syrian refugees coming in, well, 90% of them didn't even speak that language. You know where they were from? From Africa. Hello, I mean, seriously?
Well, maybe they had a rough go of it too. I'm trying to figure out where you stand on things, and I'm having a hard time because I don't want to outright accuse you of having bigoted views. I don't want to be that guy.
Well, I wouldn't like you to do that either. The point is this: we have a Grundgesetz, and it's very clear in the Grundgesetz. It states you will be granted asylum if you are politically persecuted. And by the way, there is another article in our Grundgesetz which says someone coming from a secure third country will not fall under the Article 16 to be granted asylum. So the only way any refugee under Article 16 could come into our country and be granted asylum is if he flew in. That's what the Grundgesetz says. So, but we now mixed political asylum with war refugees. Now we're talking about climate refugees. I mean, it's all mixed. They don't even produce papers. At the very least, you would expect that they have to produce some kind of a paper identifying themselves. But none of this is done. And once they're in, that's the other problem. Then when the process is run through and they were not granted asylum, we don't know where to put them. We can't send them back to their country because we don't know where they're from. And even if we do know where they're from, then the country where they're actually from, they say, well, we don't want that person. So we're stuck with these people. But I mean, that's a really clever plan. Just pour millions and millions of people into a country who do not have the slightest understanding of how we actually live, what our way of life is. They do not respect our values. Well, yeah, but just pour them in by the millions and then you're stuck with them. That's a clever plan. No, I'm sorry.
Do you have a message for Justin Trudeau before we go?
Do I have a message for Justin Trudeau? Yeah, I actually do. I did listen to that hearing. You might have imagined I would do so. And I'm sorry, once again, he was just sitting there lying. And it's quite interesting how he always thinks he has a way of talking his way out of things. But it is a record. He did call the mRNA-free people names. He called them misogynistic. He called them, labeled them as terrorists. So I really would have hoped that he would have owned up, only a little bit, owned up to his share of the problem. I really would have appreciated that, but he didn't. So my point of view of him hasn't changed.
So hugs and kisses, love Christine. Should I send that?
I'm sorry? So
hugs and kisses, love Christine. Should I send that to him or
none of that? Okay. Just leave it at Christine.
I just want, before you go, I did what I said I was going to do. I asked you questions. I let you talk. I probably disagreed with like 90% of what you said, but as you can see, we are able to have a conversation though. Well, you know, like if we had 4 hours, we could really unpack things. Even though this is a long form interview, it's still not enough for me to start jabbering. I just would rather hear other people's ideas and let them talk. Maybe the next time you come, we can do a little bit more of a back and forth, but I do appreciate the time. I thank you for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, I just love talking to you, and we should absolutely do that again. There's lots of stuff we should be talking about.
I think I've invited I forget her name right now. I think her first name is Gail, the Irish. I think she's a Irish socialist, but she's got a lot of Spitfire as well. She's in the European Parliament as well. I'll send you her bio because I think you probably know her immediately. But anyways, it was very nice meeting you. Christine Anderson, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
You too. I'm looking at the comments and settle down. Just settle down. You guys have known me for long enough to know that I'm never gonna go for the throat, ever, with any guest that I have. I am from an old school interviewing style of ask a question, let them talk. Ask a question, let them talk. It is not an endorsement of views to not be an advocate for the opposite side. So while I appreciate your views on the subject matter that this person was saying, I think it's, you know, if you don't want to watch an interview like this, you don't have to. You also don't have to announce that you're leaving. I don't know what the point of that is. Like if you don't say anything from midway through the show until the end of the show, people probably can figure that you're gone. You know, I'm not mad. I just don't understand the strategy. And I will interview her again if I want to. And I'll interview anybody else that wants to come on the show that I think is a compelling person. Compelling doesn't mean great or bad. It just means compelling. So I've received six emails since this podcast started of people telling me off. I'm looking at the comments. I see people that I love, you know, making comments that I don't find very, you know, I don't find like the enthusiasm for the, like, why is this person here is redundant, and I don't understand it. If you want to insult her, that's fine. I don't care. You do whatever you want. But I find it a little insulting to me when you have to announce that you're now leaving the chat because you just can't take it anymore. And again, I love the person that did this, but I just promise never to go on anybody's show at this network and in the middle of their show sandbag the chat with an announcement. I can't fucking take this shit. I'm not watching anymore. And I get it. You might have been talking about her opinions, but you don't need to announce your departure. You know, it's something that being a host and looking down at that, it's deflating. And you can say whatever you want to say, but so can I. We'll see you next time on Blackballed. Thank you.
Blackballed. 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 Blackballed.